All right. Hard to believe this is the last day of at least class material that we're going to be talking about.
I do have a quick question. What was the first essential to leadership?
The first one was character. We talked about a couple of areas regarding character, trust, and respect. And then the second essential is passion, kind of where we started at last class period. And as we were coming through the first component of passion, the idea of sacrifice and understanding that sacrifice. Well, we covered the first part of that material, and there's some additional material that I want us to look at in the form of a chart. And you can see the chart up here. You don't have to have this in your notes, but take down whatever you want. But the chart kind of demonstrates exactly what takes place as we rise in leadership. The more we get to a point to where we are assuming a greater level of leadership, we're going to find that it increases the level of responsibility. And based on what this chart shows us, you can see that when we first start, we have fewer responsibilities, but we have greater rights. But the further we go up in leadership, the less rights we have and the more responsibilities we have. And so that's the idea behind this, is the responsibilities increase, the rights decrease. And that's one of the areas that we touched on last Friday in talking about that we lose the right to really think about ourselves as we increase in leadership. And it's because of the responsibilities that go along with that. There is a second part to this that I'd like for you to think about as far as an exercise at some point for yourselves, and certainly as you teach others in the realm and area of leadership, and that is to make two lists. On the first list, what you need to write down is, what are you willing to give up to lead? It's going to require some element of sacrifice to be a leader. And you know that the training that you're receiving now is preparing you to be a greater leader within the realm of God's kingdom. So what are you willing to give up to lead? On the second list, you need to write down, what are you not willing to give up as you rise in leadership? Now, there's a reason why those two lists are important. Because when we look throughout Scripture, we're going to find, especially within the parables of Jesus, some areas that really involve a question that we have to ask ourselves. When you look primarily at Matthew chapter 13, you're going to find in verses 45 and 46 this parable of the pearl of great value or great price, depending upon the translation that you have. And the idea behind this parable is that this merchant, when he found this pearl of great value, went and sold everything he had in order to purchase that pearl. Now, however you want to apply the application of that parable as to what the pearl stands for and what it represents and all that goes along with that, from the standpoint of leadership, we ask ourselves the question, are we willing to trade something of value to us in order to possess or gain something of greater value? I can't answer that question for you. But I can tell you that when it comes to leadership and thinking about the area of what is essential in our leadership, when it comes to passion, we need to realize this first component about sacrifice. What are we willing to give up of value in our life to obtain or possess or gain something of greater value? That's what that pearl is going to represent. Whatever we're going to say that is in our life and in our leadership. But apart from the two charts and the exercise, there are a couple of areas that are very important when it comes to developing this mindset of sacrifice and what we're willing to give up. Yes?
Is this still under the second?
Is
this a totally?
This is still under the sacrifice, the component of sacrifice under passion. First of all, when it comes to developing the mind of sacrifice, we have to be able to see the need. What is the need? Now, obviously, we're talking about spiritual and biblical leadership, and the passage that comes to mind is Matthew chapter 9. When you look at verses 36 and 37, Jesus there is pointing out that when you look at people, like sheep without a shepherd. And then he describes the need for them to be able to beseech the Lord of harvest to send forth workers into the harvest, because the harvest is plentiful. The laborers are few. Now, what do we see? We're going to talk about this more when we get to the area of vision in just a few moments. But we've got to see the need that exists, or we'll never make the sacrifice. And this is true at a number of levels. I've worked in several different congregations, and I tell you, every time congregations can see the need, whether it's food, clothing, mission, whatever it is, whatever the need, when they see it, they'll give to it. I'll give you an example. Every February, first Sunday in February in Greenbrier, we have Missions Day. And we would get different guys to come in to speak about their mission efforts that we were involved in supporting and tell them about what was going on. Well, Ted Knight has been working in Romania kind of as a part-time missionary, going back and forth 3 or 4 times a year, spending 3 or 4 weeks at a shot. And he happened to be there that Sunday, and he was speaking to the congregation about the work in Romania. And he mentioned, not as a result of a need, he just mentioned in his lesson about visiting an orphan's home where the children were sleeping on a concrete floor. And he said the sad part is you can buy a bed over there for $20. And he went on with his lesson. One woman made it her mission to go around to everybody in that congregation as soon as that service was over. And within less than an hour, she had raised almost $1,000 to buy bed for every single one of those children. When people can see the need, they're willing to make the sacrifice. She would never have gone and asked anybody for money before. But when she saw the need, she was willing to put her lack of wanting to ask people for money behind her to go say, I want you to give me $20. We're going to buy beds. And she did. And I tell you, I've seen that over and over and over again. When congregations of people, when they see the need, they'll give to it. And our job then is to help them see the need, but we have to see it. We need to see the need that exists when it comes to the spiritual around us. We also need to know the value of the gift. It's very interesting to me when I think about the life of Jesus and what he went around doing. I mean, Scripture tells us that he went about doing good. Well, what all does that mean? Yeah, he healed the sick, he fed the hungry. I mean, he did all these things. But when you think about the gift that Jesus gave to people, or maybe we could even make it plural, the gifts, the nature of the gift that Jesus gave to people was of such that people could not exchange it, if that makes sense. Because what he gave them was opportunity. He gave them freedom. He gave them hope. He gave them forgiveness. Ultimately, he gave them himself. So what are we giving to people? You see, we tend to measure the sacrifice based upon the monetary value of the gift. You don't realize what I gave up in order to purchase this for you. That Jesus never gave people a car or clothes. I mean, he didn't do that. The nature of the gift he gave was such that people couldn't exchange it. We need to learn from that. Because what you give to people, the sacrifice you make, needs to be of such a nature that people can't exchange it. Give them hope. Give them love, compassion. Give them yourself. Third, when it comes to developing the mind of sacrifice, we need to consider the greater good. And this can be very challenging. To realize the ultimate end of what is the most important, the greater good, ultimately, eternally. And if we can keep that in mind when we're talking about what we see, is recognizing that there's something that's greater than just what I see right here. And being able to look beyond that to determine the sacrifice that we will make. And what is ultimately the greater good. And we know that that's heaven. Fourth, when it comes to developing the mind of sacrifice, make a list. And the list needs to be an answer to this question. What will you and I and others as leaders, what will we have to give up to lead? What will we have to give up? What would fall into the category of that list that as a leader we're going to have to give up? I think that starts at the very top, is your time. And I don't know of anything more valuable to give than your time. What else?
Ourselves.
Yeah, and that incorporates feelings. That incorporates your own desires, your wants, and maybe even what you think is best at the moment.
I'm just thinking you have to give up stuff, because instead of being able to buy something maybe that you want, you're going to use that money for something else.
I tell you, some of the ladies play bunco here, you know, it's kind of a cool thing. And it was interesting, the ladies usually, I think it's about $5 a piece or $2 or $3 a piece, whatever it is, that they contribute to help take care of the goods that people are eating and that kind of stuff. And the other night, the ladies took up a collection of the money, and instead of buying prizes or food or whatever they wanted, they put it in an envelope, and they're giving it to the Rocky Mountain Children's Home. What are we going to give up? Now, that's interesting. And the list could probably go on and on and on, really. But we need to understand that it's going to require something of us to lead. And then we have to ask the question, are we willing to give it up? Are we willing to make the sacrifice? That's how developing the mind of sacrifice takes place. Now, obviously we're talking about passion, and that first component that makes up this idea of passion involves sacrifice. But there's a second component that I want us to think about in regards to, we're still talking about the second essential to life and godliness, or life and leadership, and that is the idea of passion. And the first component of passion is sacrifice, but the second component of passion is self-discipline. Now, I've never taken karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or any of those self-defense classes, whatever they are. I always wanted to take Kung Fu because I love that show, you know, David Carradine, Kung Fu. Oh, grasshopper, when you can take this from my hand. I always loved that. I just want to go, boom, you know. Self-discipline. You can't deny the fact that those various martial arts areas, they really are about self-discipline. And discipline is something that's very biblical. It's very scriptural. I mean, when you think about it, fathers are to train up their children in the instruction and discipline of the Lord. Also, when you think about even within the church, we know from passages like 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 18 that there's an element of church discipline that takes place. We also know from Hebrews chapter 12 verses 5 and following, in quoting from the book of Proverbs, that the writer of the book of Hebrews is telling us that God disciplines those whom He loves. Discipline, without any doubt, is a very biblical concept. What's interesting is the fact that when you look at the fruit of the Spirit, part of the book, The Life on the Vine that you guys have been reading, well, a very key element to that is self-control, self-discipline. being able to control ourselves. Now, in thinking about this idea of self-discipline, when it comes to the idea of passion, and developing the kind of passion, whether through sacrifice or through our discipline in our life, there's very important, there's several areas that are very important when it comes to developing that kind of self-discipline. And so what I want us to look at are a couple of those areas. Number one is, if we're really going to develop self-discipline, we have to determine what our goals and priorities are in life, physically and spiritually. What are we trying to achieve? What goal do we want to reach? Well, when we know what those are, it will help us in developing the kind of discipline that we need in our life in order to achieve them. If we don't have any goals, and if we don't set priorities for our life, then why is there any need to be self-disciplined? There's not. Just do what's right in your own eyes and go about your jolly way and eat, drink, and be merry. Sit back, take your ease. But you see, we know that there's more to it than that. We know that when we're looking at goals such as reaching heaven, that there are some changes that we have to make in our life now in order to help us reach that goal. We prioritize our life. What falls in the category of the priorities in our life? I mean, apart from God first, then we come to others. Yeah, primarily family. Because while I love you guys, my family's going to come before you. My wife, my children, my grandchildren, it's going to come before you. I got a Skype call last night from Michael O'Brien. He told me he was wanting to talk to me last night. Well, I got a Skype call from my grandchildren first. Guess who got top bill? And always will. Love you, Mike. I'll chat with you later. You see, we put family in there underneath God. They take a priority. And I'll tell you something that a preacher told me years ago. And I'm not telling you this because I want you guys to leave school. I don't want you to leave school ever. I want you to finish. But he told me, he said, if you get out there and you realize that, maybe preaching's just not for you, or being in ministry is not for you, he said, it's okay. He said, but if you get out there and you finish, and he said, you're going to know how to teach and preach, and you're going to get involved in trying to save souls, he said, that's a good thing. He said, save your family first. Because he said, you can save the whole world, but if you lose your family, it won't be worth it. Save your family first. And so when you think about this discipline, yes, God is first, family is second, and then others after that. We used to say the old saying of joy, break it down acrostic, Jesus first, others second, yourself last. But that's really a misnomer, guys. Because in leadership, you lose the right to think about yourself. There's never a point in your life you're going to say, oh, now I get to think about me. No. Not if we understand leadership and the love of God. Because it's always going to be about others. And that's a great lesson. If we can learn it, it will change the direction of how we live our life. Secondly, when it comes to developing self-discipline, we need to list our reasons. Why should I have self-discipline? What are the reasons for it? Why is self-discipline beneficial to you?
Without self-discipline, you'll never reach your visions.
Can't reach your goals, your visions. How else does it benefit you?
Gets us through the hard times.
And I tell you that what you said before class, I really appreciate it in a great way. Because you have. As a class, you've been hit with a number of different areas that are challenging and hard. And praying together, working together, and realizing that Satan doesn't want you here. He would love for you to quit. Go back to doing what you were doing before. Because he doesn't want you in the kingdom. and especially in kingdom work. And so that discipline is going to help you through those hard times to know where to turn, God and each other, to help one another through them, praying for one another. So list out your reasons and understand that there are reasons why it's beneficial to have discipline in your life at whatever level you achieve that. Also, it's important to identify the obstacles when it comes to developing self-discipline. What obstacles are there going to be? Health, family, finances? I don't know. I don't know how Satan is going to work to attack you, but I can rest assured he's going to. He is going to attack you. And he'll try to attack you in the areas that he feels like you are the weakest. And he's a great observer of mankind, and has been for thousands of years. And so he watches, and he tries to determine what areas are going to get to you the most, and then try to work at attacking in those areas. And so we need to be able to identify those obstacles in our life. What will it be that we will struggle with the most? And begin to develop the type of discipline we need in our life that when that happens, we are ready to take care of it. In part, that's why that timeline, at least the initial part of what you guys developed in a timeline, is to help you see that as you continue into the future and you look at your timeline from the past, learn those periods in your life where you were able to see that here was a transition in my life that was challenging. It moved me from here to here. And so when I face that type of transition again in my life, I know now where to turn and what to do when it happens. And it may just be that as 2 Corinthians chapter 1 teaches us, that we are comforted from God so that when we see others in affliction, we're able to comfort them with the comfort with which we have received. See, that goes back to this idea that we're there for one another, that we're there to help one another when those times come. Identify those obstacles.
I've found over the last couple of years that as I've changed my mindset into really focusing on my Christianity, that the devil has used these people in the brotherhood to deter my success and all that kind of stuff. How do you handle that?
I don't know. We have enough time to deal with all of that. But at the same time, you have to realize that if it's in the world, it's going to be in the church. And the idea is that people coming out of the world, the book of 1 Corinthians is really instrumental in helping us to see that those people who came from those pagan religions, they brought them into the church, were still struggling with those same ideas of elevating the wisdom of men, which was a huge part of Greek history. And so learning from books in the Bible that deal with those kind of things, and learning that when we face those kind of situations, that we don't get in the box. I think that Leadership and Self-Deception book would be very helpful to keep around and read more periodically, especially when we face those situations. But learning how to approach the people that we know are going to help us in dealing with those situations, I think is probably a key step in that. And, of course, it involves, obviously, prayer and trust in God, and know that Satan will use anybody, even members of the church. Sad, but when people open themselves up to it, it happens. Also, if we're going to develop self-discipline, we need to challenge and eliminate our excuses. You guys have heard me tell this before, but when you say but, usually what follows is an excuse. I'm sorry, Dale, I was just scanning the room, just happened to look at you. Oh, but... Okay. That's almost that idea of that word that. Oh, I have this thing about the word that in writing. We need to eliminate the word that. But when it comes to the excuses in our life, only you know when you're faced with making a decision or setting a goal or arising to a challenge, and if your response is, I would, but, and then you're going to give a reason in your mind as to why you're not going to do that, it's time to challenge the excuse. It's an excuse. And we need to stop doing that. If we're going to develop the kind of discipline that we need to eliminate excuses. I mean, I could have very easily have said when it came to, I was wanting to get into the doctoral program, and they approached me with saying, well, you're going to need to take 2 years of classes to get a master's degree. I know you already have a master's degree, but we want you to have an accredited master's degree at Fuller. I could have said, well, that makes 6 years instead of 4 of getting through a doctoral program. And I could have said, but and then made an excuse. No. It can be done. And we can do it. But we've got to challenge and eliminate excuses that hinder us from moving forward. That's what developing self-discipline is about.
I don't know what you have on your jacket, but it is crawling up you.
Well, isn't that nasty?
Is it that little red thing that's been flying around?
I don't know if it's
What?
poisonous or
He won't come off.
I'll get it.
I can't flick him off. Thanks.
Sorry.
He just wanted a free ride.
He just
Yes, sir.
I did this
Pop in your fingers.
for about 6 months, and then it got to where I didn't like myself for doing it. But when I first made the decision to serve God and become a Christian, I had things that I wanted to put away, and I'd pray about them. But I would get to one and say, well, that's not as important as these other ones. I'll work on that later.
Sure.
And later came 6, 7 months, almost a year later, it was like, okay. Yeah.
Well, and I tell you, I don't have a problem with it now.
Right.
The way that I did when I first started. And the reason is because my body is so geared now to getting up early that I just do naturally. I don't even use an alarm clock anymore. I haven't for years. But when I first started, there were times when it was difficult for me to get up and spend time in prayer and reading the Bible. And I could have said, but I'm tired. I was up late last night. Or I could have said, but I've got this going on, and this to me is more important. I could have. I mean, I've got finals. I've got a paper due. I could have made all kinds of excuses. I wasn't going to let that happen. To me, it was a priority, which is why we start with determining goals and priorities. It was a priority to spend that time with God. And so as hard as it was, and as I initially had to start off having an alarm set to get up early to do it, in the long run, it has proven to be greatly beneficial for me. And I hope that you will find some way to do those same areas in your life when it comes to prioritizing what you do and how you do it. Challenge and eliminate excuses. Because what's going to happen is you're going to work with congregations, and they're going to say, oh, we've done that before. And you're going to say, we can achieve this. And they're going to say, but have you thought about, and then they're going to start making excuses as to why it can't be done. Don't let it happen. Challenge those and eliminate excuses. Also, develop new behaviors. What I'm talking about is a lifestyle. If you're going to develop self-discipline, it's got to be a lifestyle. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, limitations are boundaries that we place in our minds. Limitations are boundaries that we place or set in our minds. That's all they are. And if we're going to develop some new behaviors, we've got to realize that we can't set those limitations in our mind of saying, I can't do that. You can do it. It needs to be a lifestyle. Don't just challenge yourself to do something once. When it comes to growing in your relationship with God, make it a lifestyle every day. Not just one day a week or just a couple of times a week or when I've got some time, when I'm not out doing something else. Even when I was having surgery, I wanted my Bible and my phone because my prayer list is on my phone. I'm not going to let a day go by without that time in prayer and study. And nothing short of being unconscious is going to stop me from doing it. You got to have that, guys. It needs to be your lifestyle.
Can you say that quote again? Limitations
Are boundaries that we place or set in our minds. And then when it comes to developing self-discipline, it's certainly great to focus on the results. And we're going to come back to this idea in just a moment. But it's important to realize that there are benefits to developing self-discipline. Focus on the benefits. Don't be thinking about, I'm tired. There have been many mornings that I've fallen asleep while I was praying because I was so tired. And I'd wake up and I'd start again. It happens. But don't say I'm not going to do it because I'm tired. Don't say you can't. Instead, focus on what's going to happen as a result. The benefits are powerful if we'll just focus on them. And certainly there are great spiritual benefits that will help us when it comes to developing self-discipline. Now let me share some secrets. Some secrets to self-discipline. I love this section. Because when it comes to the secrets of self-deception, you've got to first of all create incentives. Now we've had several different guys.
Self-deception.
Huh?
You said self-deception.
Self-discipline, sorry. Self-discipline. It's a force of habit. Habit you can change. Create incentives. You've had several different guys who have come to this class, and almost without exception, they've all made some reference to this idea of having some kind of a reward system. So set up an incentive. If we accomplish this goal, if I'm able to develop this type of area in my life, then I'm going to reward myself by doing whatever it is. Now, it doesn't need to be going out and spending money to buy something, but are there other rewards that we have for our life? Find some way to create an incentive for your discipline. Secondly, track your progress. And if you can do it positively, it's all the better. Track your progress.
What do you mean by doing it positively?
Well, sometimes we start charting out where we're going and how we're going, and it's going downhill. And so we're thinking, this is not going anywhere. This is getting worse. Well, try to stay away from the negative side of it. Try to focus on the progress that has been made and in a positive way and why it has been made. And it will help you in trying to overcome those areas that can be negative. Also, when it comes to the secrets of self-discipline, develop a support system. It's very key, even in your relationships in this school. It's key in your family. It's key within the church. You need others that you can know, that you can go to, and you can rely upon to help provide the support you need. Now, obviously, we're talking primarily from a spiritual perspective, but it's true physically. I mean, isn't it interesting that when people struggle with areas that are of an addictive nature in their life, what's the first thing that helps them in being able to overcome that? A support group. And whether we're talking about areas that are of a nature that are addictive, or weight, or whatever it is we're trying to deal with or overcome, having a support group is important. It's no different in the church. And let me tell you, there have been times where I have felt very alone, and I know of many other preachers who have done and gone through the same thing. There are times they get discouraged and they feel like the Elijah syndrome, where I'm the only one here doing this. You got to have somebody to talk to. You need a support system. That's a part of why having a mentor is a good thing, but as well, just having friends. People that you can call and say, I'm struggling. I need you to pray for me, and I need your help. It's important. Develop a support system. Fourth, you need to be able to differentiate between long and short-term goals. Differentiating between long and short-term goals is one of the areas that really separates those who are very successful in business versus those who are not. You see, short-term, we tend to think of more from the standpoint of the pain that's involved. And especially we think about that in the realm of when it comes to running or weightlifting or exercise of some nature. It's that initial, my muscles are going to hurt. Is it worth it? I'm just not sure I want to do that because it's going to hurt. Well, but are we thinking long-term? Are we thinking, yes, this is going to hurt initially to reach this short-term goal, but am I thinking long-term and the benefits of it long-term? I was talking with Michael O'Brien last night, and I was just hurting for him because he's about 70 pounds overweight, and he's been diagnosed with diabetes, He's had intestinal issues that he's had to have surgery on in China, which would not be the place I'd want to have surgery. And it's like, he looks bad. Physically, he looks very unhealthy, and he's hurting. And he was telling me last night, when I get back to Wuhan, I'm going to have to start walking. And I'm like, you think? Why are you waiting till you get back to Wuhan? Start now. But see, that initial thought of is, how am I going to do it? It's going to be painful to get started, and it's not something I'm used to doing. It's not something I want to do. If people, generally speaking, have you ever noticed the people that join the gym in January?
Mm-hmm.
How long does that last?
January.
If that.
Yeah.
I mean, we owned a fitness center in Greenbrier, and I'm telling you what, January is our gravy month. People would come in and sign up, and then they were gone by the end of the month, if not before. They would come in and they would work out, and we would try to tell them, start slow. Do not come in here and try to do 500 sit-ups on the machine, because you won't be back, at least for a week, because you can't stand the pain. Don't come in here and try to get on an elliptical machine and do this for 20 minutes. Start with 5. I mean, they just don't, they've got this vision of, I want to come in, I want to work out, I want to be doing it for a couple weeks, and I want to look like Charles Atkins. I'm like, it's not going to happen, partner. I'm sorry. You're going to have to dedicate your life to doing this every day for the rest of your life. When I had back surgery in 2003, the doctor came in and he gave me a list of exercises, and he said, let me say this as clearly as I know how. You need to do these exercises the rest of your life, or you'll be back in here seeing me. Now, that's pretty good incentive, don't you think? I mean, I cared very little for going through that process, and the recuperation was even more excruciating. What are the long and short-term goals that you have? You need to know the difference between the two, and you need to be able to see long-term. We're going to come back to vision a little bit later. Also, when you think about the secrets of self-discipline, it really comes down to this. Just get started. You know, it cracks me up. Of course, this is a good timing because we're coming up on the first of the year. I don't know how many people, whether it comes to exercise, eating right, stopping bad habits, starting new habits, whatever it is, January the 1st, that's when I'm going to get started. Why are you waiting? If you know that it's something that's going to benefit you, if you know that it's something you need to stop doing or start doing, why are you waiting until, well, I'm going to start Monday. I'm going to eat the way I want to all weekend, and I'm going to start Monday. No, you won't. And if you do, you won't last. If we're not dedicated enough to start now, what's going to be different come Monday or January the 1st? We need to get started now. Don't wait.
I trained a lot of guys in CrossFit back in Oklahoma, just friends of mine and everything. And every single guy that said that, like, I mean, I had several guys that said, "Hey, I know you train people, and I plan on starting at the beginning of this next month." And they're like, "And I'm going to get on a regimented diet at that point as well."
Yeah.
And I was always just like, I was thinking, no, you're not. Not if you're waiting 3 weeks to start. And they never did. Every single one.
And we don't. Now think about it from a spiritual perspective. Do we know we need to spend time set aside in prayer every day, study, outside of schoolwork? What are you waiting on? I'm going to wait till I graduate when I got more time. Won't happen. If you think you're busy now, wait till ministry. I don't know how many guys have come back and they're like, I didn't realize how busy I would be in ministry. I couldn't wait to get out of school. Now it's like, I'd like to be back in school. Like, that's the way it works. Because, see, it's not just going to be 6 or 7 instructors or 5 per quarter who are going to be demanding assignments from you. You're going to have 35, 40, or maybe 200 or 300 people who are going to be demanding of you. And they're going to say, we need you to come do this. We need you to come do this. And we need you to come do this. And plus, on top of that, you're going to write 2 sermons and maybe 2 Bible classes every week, 2 personal Bible studies, and you're going to have a ton of other things going on in your family. Life doesn't slow down. We need discipline. That's what we need. And I'm hoping, my prayer is that what you learn here in school and the discipline you develop while you're in school will help you have discipline in ministry. Because you're going to need it. And guys, I tell you, just to coin a bad phrase, to be honest, I'm always amazed at the guys that say, well, I know this assignment's due, and I've got some time now, but I'd really rather go do this, and I'll put that assignment off and get it done later. And then they're scrambling at the last minute, trying to figure out how they can put together just whatever they can to get by. That's not helping you. Discipline yourself when it comes to assignments. Set them up on a schedule and make yourself turn them in 2 days early. Always set it up on your schedule where the assignment is due 2 days ahead of when the actual due date is, and turn it in. And then, if you happen to get caught behind the 8 ball, you got a 2-day cushion. But if not, you got a 2-day break. Now, me personally, I'd rather have a 2-day break than to be caught behind the 8 ball. Get started now. And, of course, you guys are knowing, of course, Chris and Brad know already because they've been here almost a year, that you guys in your second quarter already are starting to know now. And the guys coming in next quarter, new guys will be starting as freshmen. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to get all those assignments, and they're going to think, and what they're going to do is they're going to take the first week to try to adjust, and they're already behind the 8 ball. Encourage them not to do that. Guys, get started. Do something every day. Do you remember that time sheet that we gave you in orientation? Time management. And it said, accomplish an assignment every day. Plan a 6-day week. Not 5 days in class and then a weekend's off, but make it 6 days. Spend all day Saturday doing work. It's 2 years. Discipline yourself to accomplish what needs to be done.
I think Wes and I would like to know when you've ever taken a 2-day break.
I don't know that I ever have, but I'm about to for Christmas.
Okay.
I'm going to take a week.
Well, sorry for involving in that, but
When it comes to life and leadership, we've already talked about the first 2 essentials. We've talked about the need for character. Character involves trust and respect. We've also talked about passion, which involves sacrifice and self-discipline. But the third essential to life and leadership involves the Son. The idea of what we need to survive in life is the Son. Now, I've taken the time, and we're not going to go through it in class, but it is incredible the value that the Sun, being the perfect distance of 93 million miles away from the Earth and the Earth's orbit around the Sun, makes it possible for life. If we were 1/10 of an inch, 1/10 of an inch out of orbit, if we were 1/10 of an inch closer to the Sun, we'd burn up. And if we were 1/10 of an inch away from the Sun, we'd freeze to death. It's perfect. It is the perfect orbit and distance from the Sun in its orbit so that life exists. I mean, everything from the chemical reactions and the photosynthesis that takes place for plant life to grow and thrive, that's why we need the Sun. It's essential. And obviously, when you think about the Sun, you can't help but think about vision, because if we didn't have the Sun, we could not see where we're going. And so just as the Sun is essential for our physical life, vision is essential for our leadership. We've got to be able to see where we're going. Now, did I tell you the story about the Cave of the Winds?
no.
About going to the Cave of the Winds? I know you've heard it. Cheryl and I, about 20 years ago, Dick and Deanna Brandt actually took us to the Cave of the Winds. Sometime when we have time, let me tell you about the card trick they showed me down there. It's awesome. But while we were there at the Cave of the Winds, they took us back. I mean, if you guys have ever been in a cavern tour or on a cave tour, they get you back there, and one of the great things they love to do is turn the lights off. I don't know that I've ever been any place that was that dark. There is such a great fear that is created in that type of darkness, because even when there's somewhat of light, when you close your eyes, you can still see the shadow of your hand in front of your face. You know that something's there. But the type of darkness that we were in down there, it just petrified you. You were afraid to move because you did know, seeing going in, that off to the edge is a long way down. Or that if you trip and fall, you might stumble into some stalactite or stalagmite, whichever one it is, and pierce yourself through falling onto it. I mean, you don't want to move, and you certainly don't know which direction to go to get out, because you can't see light. Everyone in the room, I mean, it was deafening silent. And then all of a sudden they turned on a little bitty light, just one, over in the far corner. And it was like every eye in the room went, shoo. I mean, now we knew we had direction because we could see light. Of course, my favorite thing was what the tour guide said about if you remain in that type of darkness 30 days, you go blind. And if you remain in that darkness for 90 days, you go crazy. And I couldn't help but think of Scripture where they will be cast into outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Why do you think it is that Scripture describes God as light, and in Him there is no darkness? And if we say that we have fellowship with Him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light, as He Himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sin. We need the light to be able to see where we're going. And isn't it interesting that God made a lesser light to rule the night and a greater light to rule the day? Light, vision. There are a number of areas about vision that I want us to be talking about as we go through this material. Let me share with you some facts, and you'll need your Bibles because I'd like for you to look up some of the areas we're going to be talking about. When it comes to the first fact on vision, it starts inside. It's really this ability to see what is unseen. It's more what we would call insight instead of physical sight. Turn your Bibles over to the book of Hebrews chapter 11. You guys know this chapter. You know what it's about. It's a great chapter that deals with faith. And I love the way that the writer of the book of Hebrews describes for us in verse 1 the definition of faith. It is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things what? Unseen. You see, faith is that ability to see what can't be seen with the physical eye. And so when we go through the chapter, and I encourage you to do this at some point when you have some time, is to go through and underline the various terms that are used in this chapter that have to do with vision. Notice in verse 1, we've already talked about the things that are unseen or not seen. And then notice in verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. Isn't that interesting? Verse 7, by faith Noah being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his house. Of course, Abraham, in verse 8, is described as one who went out not knowing where he was going. Similar terminology. But notice verse 10. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Then notice verse 13. All these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance. Then the passage I really want us to focus on is down in verses 23 and following. Because here we're going to learn about Moses. When he was born, was hidden, so he couldn't be seen. He was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. And the cap on this mountain is beautifully described in chapter 12 when he talks about Jesus and he says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith. Now, when you look at the life of Moses, and you think about what he did and how it's described here in this text, he endured the challenging times in his life. And he was able to overcome those challenges because he could see what could not be seen with the human eye. He endured ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Then he was not afraid. Faith makes us fear less. You see, there's no reason for us to have that fear when we know we can see the one who is unseen. I mean, Moses was one who not only endured affliction, but he was one who overcame fear because of what he was looking to, who he was looking to. And I love the way the writer of the book of Hebrews describes it as faith. And by faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood so that he who destroyed the firstborn would not touch them. You see, faith, his ability to see what was unseen, is what drove the actions of his life in keeping with the commands of God. Isn't it powerful to think about? Here's Moses. You see, it starts inside. It's that ability to see beyond the physical realm. You see, we look through the eye of faith. That's why this is so important. When it comes to vision, it starts inside. Secondly, it develops deeper conviction. Turn back to the book of Joshua. We talked about this to some degree back earlier in the OT1, but specifically when we look at Joshua, chapter 14, this is Caleb's request. I always wanted a grandson named Caleb, but Nehemiah's better.
We still have time.
Don't change it. But the reason I like Caleb is because of the conviction that he had. And when you read through this whole section, and you'll notice that one of the key words is inheritance. Now, these are the territories which the sons of Israel inherited in the land of Canaan. So this dividing up the land is taking place. Well, Caleb, Joshua 14.
I got it wrong. All right,
So Joshua is going to be approached by Caleb concerning his request. And Caleb is saying, Moses had given the inheritance to the two tribes and the half-tribe beyond the Jordan. He did not give an inheritance to the Levites among them, for the sons of Joseph were two tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And they did not give a portion to the Levites in the land, except cities to live in, with their pasture lands, for their livestock and their property. Thus the sons of Israel did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then, here's the point. Then the sons of Judah drew near to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite said to him, you talk about beautiful. This section will preach. You know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought word back to him as it was in my heart. Conviction. That's what we're talking about. But then notice what he says. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear. But I followed the Lord my God fully. Notice the terminology that's being used to describe Caleb's conviction. He speaks what was in his heart, and he was fully devoted to the Lord. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot is trodden will be an inheritance to you and to your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God fully. Now here's what I love about Caleb. When you get to verse 10, Caleb's conviction is as strong now as it was when they first went into the land. Because he says in verse 10, behold, the Lord has let me live, just as he spoke these 45 years. Now, how old is he now? 85. From the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses when Israel walked in the wilderness, and now, behold, I am 85 years old today. I am still as strong today as I was in the day of Moses. Now, guys, he may have been. I'm not challenging what the Scripture says. Now, this is Caleb talking. Remember that. Now, I'm 51 years old, and I tell you personally, in some ways, I feel like I'm more strong than I was when I was 20. When you age, you don't tend to see yourself as being weaker. You tend to see yourself as being able to do things you did when you're 20. Now, it doesn't take long in trying to do those that your body reminds you that you can. But at the same time, mentally, you still feel that way. You can envision in your mind doing things that you did when you were younger. And I don't know if that's what Caleb's thinking or not. He says his strength is as it was when he was first going into the land, when he was 40. As my strength was then, so my strength is now for war, for going out and coming in. Now then, give me this mountain, about which the Lord spoke on that day, for you heard on that day that the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out as the Lord has spoken. Is that not cool? I love that. When we have vision, we have conviction. It develops. It can't help but develop a deeper conviction. And when you look at the vision of Caleb, his mind, in his eye, he was seeing the conquering of this mountain, this country that had been promised to him as an inheritance. It didn't matter to him that there were Anakim there and that they had fortified cities, no different than it was 45 years earlier when they went and spied out the land. He didn't care because he knew that God was going to win the victory for him. Now, he was still going to have to fight the battles. You guys are going to have to fight the battles. I appreciated earlier, as I mentioned, about Dale's comments in the class, to kind of start off showing that the challenge you guys have been fighting. You're going to keep fighting battles. It doesn't stop, whether you're in school or out of school. You're going to keep fighting them. But when you can see the victory, and know that the victory belongs to, when you've got that kind of faith, that vision to see the unseen, it will develop a greater conviction in your life. Third, it gives us something worth dying for. You'll notice there's a ... at the end of that. Because once you put the ... then write, thus it is worth living for. It gives us something worth dying for. Thus, it gives us something worth living for. You know the passages in the New Testament where Peter so impetuously would speak without really thinking. And certainly as Jesus at the end of John chapter 13 is about to leave them, he knows his destiny. And he's trying to let them know what's about to take place. That he's going away, and where he's going, they cannot come yet. And Peter's the one who speaks up. And he says, Lord, I'm willing to lay down my life for you. In his mind, he knew what was worth dying for. But he didn't realize that might actually be what was required. And so as a result, Jesus says, are you willing to lay down your life for me? Imagine how crushing to hear the words of the Savior say, before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. You see, Peter didn't have the vision to see that coming. He wanted the Lord to know, I'm willing to stand for you. I don't know but what pulling out the sword and chopping off the ear of the high priest was not an effort to try to show Jesus, I'm willing to do what I said. But when he realized that the Lord was going to be crucified and that what he had anticipated concerning the establishing of a physical kingdom in Jerusalem was not happening, things changed. When we are able to really see the unseen, that vision gives us something worth dying for. Now, I don't want to die. I'm not looking forward to the process of dying at whatever level that is. I don't know. I don't think that's what we want. I do look forward to heaven, and I think we all do. But if we do, and if we know that's worth dying for, then let's live for it. It's worth taking our stand on the Word of God to live for it. That's vision. And the vision we need to have as leaders. We need to cast that vision for those in the congregations we're working with and the ministries that we're involved in to help them see what's worth dying for and then live for it. It also gives us strength for life's struggles. When we have vision, you guys have heard the passage before and you know the text in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's my favorite verse to use to teach people they can learn how to memorize Scripture. You know, people say, oh, I just can't memorize Scripture. I said, sure, it's easy. You can teach people all the time. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and I get them to repeat it. And within 2 seconds, they've already memorized a verse. It can be done if we choose to do so. But have you ever thought about really the depth of that statement? Now, we've given lip service to the idea of the context, and we know the context is the idea of being content. And Paul was content in whatever circumstances he found himself, whether he had an abundance or he was without. He was content. He said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But think about the greater context of that statement in light of where Paul was when he wrote it. Where was he? He's in prison. Now, I can't imagine that prisons then were better than they are today. I would imagine they were much worse. When I was in Ghana, West Africa, last year before, on the way back to the airport, we had a few hours. And Stephen, as he was taking me back, wanted to stop and show me one of the old fortresses along the coastline there that was a slave trading post. And he wanted me to see how African slaves were treated. And incredible. I mean, unbelievable. And they take you, of course, they have lights down in there now where you can see. And you can see a line on the wall where human feces was piled up. You can see one trough about that deep down the middle that they peed in. I guess they did. But to think that they were shoved in there by the hundreds on top of each other. And it automatically made me think about the type of prison situation that Paul would have been in. Chains around his wrists and his feet. I don't know if it was that bad for Paul or not, but I can't imagine it being a pleasant situation. And for him to be able to write, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Let your forbearing spirit be known to all men. And then he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You see, his vision was not in those chains or that dirt floor that he was on or chained or whatever it was. His faith, his ability to see was beyond his physical circumstance. And to realize that what it was that would help him endure those struggles and that would give him strength was that faith. And it's our faith, that ability to see beyond what we can see now, that will help us to have the strength to tackle life's struggles. But the last part of this is concerning facts on vision, is the fact that vision comes before victory. Vision comes before victory. This is one of my favorite texts. We touched on it when we were studying Genesis, so if you'd like to turn over there, I mentioned at the time we'd be talking about it more in leadership. Genesis chapter 13. We're going to look primarily at verse 14, but that whole context down through there, verses 13 through 15.
13.
Through 15. Now, when you think about the overall context of what's happening here, Abraham and Lot, his nephew, have reached a point they've got so much stuff they cannot stay together. So Abraham says, look out and choose whichever direction you want to go, and I'll go the opposite direction. And so Lot chose the valley of Sodom and Gomorrah in that area. And it's after he leaves that God then, to Abraham, says, lift up your eyes and look from where you stand, northward, southward, eastward, westward. All that your eyes see, I will give to you and to your descendants forever. What a powerful text. There's so much, so rich from those three statements that he makes. The first of which is, lift up your eyes and look. Now, I've been running, you guys know that, for 20-some years. I love it. I thrive on it. I mean, I got to have it every day. And when I was younger, I liked to run races. I liked to go, not because I was going to win, never chose to win, because there's no way I was going to run some of those guys. But I just love that race mentality of being there, the competition, the joy, the camaraderie. So I used to read a lot about racing and how it worked and how that mentality and getting that kick at the end and always finish like a runner kind of stuff. And what's interesting to me about running is the fact that they tell you don't look down and don't look around. Keep your eyes looking forward to the finish line. And I love watching the Olympics, especially the track and field events and the long term, the long races, marathons. But it's interesting to me how many times I've seen guys lose a race because they took their eyes off of the finish line to see how close their opponent was to them, only to watch them go past them. We need to lift up our eyes and look. You know the story in Matthew 14 about Peter. He got out of the boat, and he walked on the water until he took his eyes off of Jesus. And when he took his eyes off of Jesus, he began to sink. You remember in John chapter 4 with the Samaritan woman, where here Jesus tells the apostles as she has gone to get her people to come back, and she says, and Jesus says to the apostles, lift up your eyes and look, the fields are white and it's harvest. What do we see? When we lift up our eyes and look, what do we see? When you look at your families, what do you see? When you look at the church, what do you see? When you look at the world around us, what do you see? Our vision comes before victory. What we see. And if I could add one thought to the idea of lifting up your eyes and look, it would be this. Lift them up and look. Look on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. See how great a cloud of witnesses surround us. Since we have this great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. That's lifting up our eyes. Look. Because when we look through the heavenly portal, it changes the way we see our families. It changes the way we see each other. It changes the way we see the church and the world around us. vision comes before victory. But there's a second component to what Abraham was told by God, because he said, lift up your eyes and look from where you stand. I don't know where you're going to end up in ministry. But if you're waiting to get involved in doing the Lord's work, to do kingdom work, till you get to that place in ministry, then my advice is to you to lift up your eyes and look from where you stand. There are opportunities that are going on around you every day. But if we're not looking for them, we'll never see them. From where you stand. You see, far too often, this idea of the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. I don't know if you've ever heard the story that's told about the house with golden windows. It's a story of this young boy that grew up all his life looking across the valley at a house on the other side of the valley that had golden windows. And he became so consumed with going to see those golden windows. He wanted that house. He wanted to live in that place that had golden windows. And so he sacrificed everything in order to go. And when he got there, they weren't golden windows at all. Because when he turned around and looked back home, he found out that the journey that had taken him all day to get there allowed him to see his home in the golden windows of his own home as the sun was setting behind the hill. You see, sometimes we miss what's going on right here because of our wanting something out there. Lift up your eyes and look from where you stand. And then notice the third component is northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For Abraham to not look in a certain direction was to miss possessing it. And it kind of ties in that idea of looking from where we stand. Because if we're only looking in one direction, we're going to miss possessing something that's going on around us. So what we have to do is look in every direction. Don't just be focused in one. Because that kind of vision is what brings victory. Because God promised, all that you see, I will give to you and your descendants forever. It's a great text. Guys, it makes a great sermon. It'll preach. And you can use so much from what took place with Abraham, the promise that God fulfilled to him, to be able to see how that same spiritual application fits for us today. And the need for us to realize that when we're talking about vision, we've got to see before we're going to have the reward and the victory. Now, as we continue to look at the idea of vision, the question that comes up is, why do we need it? Why do we need vision? Well, there are several reasons why we need vision. But we need vision because vision sees the future and speaks as if it is present. You've heard me tell this, told it back in OT1, but when I first saw the vision statement for Bear Valley, for the Bible Institute, about the number of extension schools, I was reading through it. I was like, I don't know why I'm reading this, because this doesn't exist. We didn't have 75 schools. Church didn't have 1,200 members. But they were speaking as though it was today, as though that's where the church is now. And it took me reading through that several times before it dawned on me. That's a vision statement. They're looking to the future, but they are speaking as though it is now, that it is present. And one of the reasons why vision is the third essential before you really begin looking at the goals, which didn't work out that way this quarter, but the reason for that is because unless you can see it in your mind, it makes it very difficult to set the goals that you're going to speak of as though they are present. That's why we need vision, because it sees the future, but it speaks as though it is present. It also provides purpose and direction. Without vision, at best we're going to walk in circles, but we're going to have no clue where we're going. We've got to be able to see, because when we can see where we're going, it gives us that purpose and direction. Have you ever thought about Psalm 119, 105? Thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light unto my path. See, God's word is what gives us purpose and direction. When we read it, we can see where we are to go, how we are to live, and what's waiting for us at the end of the journey. That's why we need that vision, being able to see the unseen. It provides us with purpose and direction, but it also drives the actions of our life. That's what we talked about concerning Moses. It drives the actions of our life in obedience to God when we have vision. That's why we need it. Because when we can see that, when we can see through the eye of faith what God has provided, it's going to change the way we live. But far too often what happens is we can't see it. Peter couldn't see it. At least not at first. And what happens oftentimes for us, especially when we're young, is we can't see it. And one of the reasons we get involved in activities we shouldn't is because we really can't see it. It's not driving the actions of our life. We're still focused on self. And it takes time to work through and grow and overcome so that we're actually beginning to gather that focus in our life that helps drive the actions of our life. Maybe that's why God held those in Numbers chapter 20, or Numbers chapter 14, those who are 20 and older accountable. Because by that point in their life, they were beginning to see, but they were choosing a different path. Maybe it's going to be a little maturity that helps us have the kind of vision that's going to change the way our lives are lived. That's why we need vision. And we've got to cast that vision for others as leaders. It also powers enthusiasm and commitment. That's the idea that we talked about earlier concerning Caleb. And certainly when we think about the idea of the vision that we have, when we're able to cast that vision for others and help others see that vision, man, it's going to power their enthusiasm and commitment. It's going to make a huge difference in their life when we're able to show them the way. Why do we need vision? Because vision challenges us to do something great. It challenges us to do something great. Guys, don't settle for the small stuff. Don't have a vision that can only see the small stuff. Think big. If God truly is, and I believe that He is, able to do far beyond all that we ask or think by the power that works within us, then we are challenged by God Himself to think big. And how many times do we limit Him by the boundaries that we place in our own minds concerning what can be done? Faith. We need vision because it challenges us to do something great. How do we improve our vision? Well, a couple of ideas to share with you. One is we need to ask some very evaluating questions. There are a list of about 5 that I'll share with you. The first one is this: do I see myself correctly? Now, the problem is we generally don't see ourselves correctly. We tend to see ourselves a little differently than others see us. I've had to laugh several times in looking at the evaluations you guys have turned in. It tickles me. Do I see myself correctly? Spiritually speaking, how do we determine if we're seeing ourselves correctly? How do we do that, Dale?
Taking a long look in that mirror,
What mirror?
looking at the standard. I mean, what James talks about, you look at in the mirror and then immediately forget, who you are. It's looking to see who you really are, not
Yeah.
who you wish you were. But
Yeah, I think that's where it begins, is looking in that mirror. What else?
Others you trust are part of that mirror.
Ah, very good. What becomes the challenge there is asking them. Delete, delete, delete. But the challenge is going and asking them. And especially those who are closest to us, family, close friends, and asking them, what do you see as the priority in my life? Are we willing to accept the response that they might give us? Do I see myself correctly? Now, the sad part is sometimes we see ourselves less than who we really are. Sometimes we see ourselves more than who we really are. But the purpose is being able to see ourselves correctly. And I tell you, that can be challenging.
I can also add another challenge to that is to keep a very detailed journal, whether it be for a day or a week. And that's self-reflective. You don't have to involve anybody else. But if you're honest with yourself, you can look right there at the print and see what you've done.
And I tell you, it will be challenging to really evaluate how much time you spend in your life in those various areas. You had your hand up, Daniel.
Well, I was just going to say sometimes people don't see you as you really are.
Well, that's true if we're putting on a facade, which is even a greater problem. But I would think my family would know me pretty well.
Right.
Now, if I were to go to some of you guys and say, you probably wouldn't know me that well.
Right.
But having known me 6 months, but people that I've grown up with, people in my family, they know me pretty well. And they're going to be a little more honest with me than... It's kind of like the evaluations. You guys evaluating yourselves and evaluating your other classmates. It's kind of... I get a little humor out of it because I know that the part of the issue is it's hard to say, I didn't like it. I'm sorry, I didn't understand it. And so it's challenging to do that, especially when somebody you've only known 6 months, you don't really know them. You don't know how they're going to respond. You don't know how they're going to react. Are they going to get mad if I say this? Are they not going to get mad? It's a rare quality to be able to really know that someone Dean Murphy sent me a note last night wanting me to evaluate his lesson. And so I know Dean well enough to know that if I were to sugarcoat it, he'd be mad. Now, he may not like what I tell him, but I also know that he's not going to hold that against me, and he's not going to hold a grudge against me, and he's not going to tell me yes, no, that's just not Dean. But I also know that there are some people I can't do that with, because I've seen them respond in other ways at other times in a bad way. So it's a little more challenging to do that.
I wasn't here for our presentation. Did you share what Ross did? The exercise that he does in training?
No.
Sort of. Not
Okay,
not
so
very detailed.
Ross Aliciani is a 27-year-old leader at Northwestern Mutual, and he started out as an intern with the company, and he wants to be directly involved with their training. And so after they've finished about half a year of doing joint work and stuff with him, he has them all fill out an evaluation and try to guess what his top 5 values are. And he sees how close they are to what they really are. Because he goes over his daily with his assistant. And he wants people to be able to tell just by how he lives his life. And he said, usually they get 3 of them right out of 5. And that shows him where he needs to work or how he needs to emphasize these other things are just as important.
Wow.
I thought that was pretty gutsy for a 27-year-old to say, right
It's
now.
gutsy for anybody.
Yeah.
And here's the challenge. Do you know what your top 5 values are? Do you see yourself correctly? Another question that we need to ask ourselves is, what are my inner desires? I mean, deep down, not just what you think someone wants you to say or what you want your family to believe, but what really are your inner desires? What do you want more than anything else? See, I can't answer that question for you. I'm not asking you to tell me. But we need to ask it. And we need to be honest with ourselves. Third, is it written down? Now, this kind of ties in with what Rob was just talking about concerning the guy he interviewed. And really, do we have our top 5 values written down to where we can look at them every day and make sure that our life is being lived up to those values? Because what gets written down is generally what you're going to work on. Also, what are the resources that we have available to us? Now, physically, spiritually, strengths, weaknesses, what resources do we have available? What people do we have that are available to us to help us when it comes to improving our vision? So we need to ask, what are our resources? And then, do I have a clear sight of God? Do I really have a clear vision of God? And you may find that a clear vision of God is what makes a difference in whether we really see ourselves correctly. There is a book that is written by a guy named David Benner. I believe it's Brenner, maybe it's Brenner, B-R-E-N-N-E-R. And it's the idea of really about self, seeing myself in light of God. I don't remember the exact title, but anyway, I have it up in the office. But it's a very interesting book because he really breaks down the need for us to look at ourselves correctly based upon how we see God. And it affects our relationship with Him. So I would encourage you to be thinking about those questions. Also, when we think about improving our vision, not only do we need to ask some evaluating questions, but we need to learn from leaders who have vision. What leaders do you know that have vision, that they're able to look down the road 15, 20, 25 years? I tell you, there's one guy in the extension program that just blows my mind when it comes to his vision, spiritually speaking. And that's Stephen Ashcraft. I like being around him just because it really helps me to learn the value of vision. I mean, I can't even describe for you the way that he and his mind can already, it's like a chess match. Have you ever played chess with one of those guys that he can see your moves in advance? I mean, he knows, he's able to tell when he moves a certain way, he knows how you're going to move real quickly.
Seems there's like that with Candyland.
Candyland's a little different, but have you ever played with guys like that? That, I mean, it's like they knew you were going to go this direction. Stephen is that way. We were talking about how to develop a certain program and how to overcome some of the issues that ACU is bringing out and dealing with in the work in Southern Ghana. And Stephen was like, if we will do this, this will happen. And when that happens, then we will do this. And when that happens, then we will do this. I mean, he had it mapped out years in advance in his mind, just like a chess match. And I was like, that's almost scary. But you see, he knows, he sees in his mind in advance. Be with those people. Spend time with folks like that. Because it will help improve your vision when you begin to recognize that he's looking through the eye of faith. Also, establish a vision that is concrete. Don't have a vision that is just vague. Because, Dale, vagueness breeds problems. It breeds vagueness. People don't know where you're going because you don't know where you're going. You can't see. It's just this, this vision is just vague. It's just, oh yeah, we'd like to somehow kind of, oh no, yeah, but we'd like to, don't be like that. Make something that's concrete. Where we're going to be in 50 years is here. 1,200 members, 75 extension schools, 25 elders or 50 elders or whatever it is. I mean, have something that's concrete. People can see it. They can measure it. Also, be committed with your time and energy. When it comes to vision, be committed with your time and your energy. Because if you can see it, you can do it. And then share it with others. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others. Because sometimes it's just saying it out loud that helps others to see it and motivate you to accomplish it. Vision. Now, the reason why I'm about to share with you what I'm about to is because in my mind, when I think about the idea of vision, that beginning with the end in view is what's going to help us in what I believe to be one of the most important areas about your leadership. And what I'm talking about is the idea of a legacy. And really, this is kind of where we're going to close things out for this entire class, apart from doing the SWOT analysis. No, this is part of vision. Because only when you're able to see the idea of the future with the end in mind will you then begin to determine your legacy. When you think of men like Martin Luther King Jr., the legacy that they left. One individual made the statement, and I can't remember his name right now, but the idea is legacy is not what you are leaving to. It's what you are leaving behind. Eleanor Roosevelt said, life is like a parachute jump. You only get one chance to get it right. I don't know how true that really is, but at the same time it is interesting because of the point she was trying to make. When you think about legacy, I'd like for you to remember this. Legacy comes when we put leaders in a position to do great things without us. And what that means is we've got to overcome this mentality of thinking it won't get done unless I do it. Or if you want a job done right, you got to do it yourself. That's not legacy.
I'm sorry, is that quote maybe wrong? Is the legacy comes when we put others in a position to do great things without us?
Yes.
Is that a trick?
Legacy comes when we put leaders in a position to do great things without us. I'll explain.
All right.
You should know me well enough by now to know I'm going to explain.
I know sometimes you like to do that. You know, you told us to sometimes read a passage wrong. Maybe he's intentionally putting that up.
We won't be here anymore.
I know, Dad, he was.
Someone's got to be
You
here.
wouldn't do that.
So think about what legacy involves. A legacy involves, first of all, vision. That's the reason that companies are as a component of vision. Because you've got to be able to see the end. You've got to be able to see through the eye of faith what's at the other end before you can determine the idea of your legacy. Secondly, legacy involves learning to multiply. If you read much of John Maxwell, it will not take you long before you come across this statement. If you want to grow, lead followers. But if you want to multiply, lead leaders. If you want to grow, lead followers. But if you want to multiply, lead leaders. It's interesting. When I was in my teens and 20s, early 20s, my desire was to be a musician. I wanted to be a famous musician. I wanted to be able to play on a big stage. Loved it. I loved the high of being able to stand in front of people and perform in a way that brought them to their feet.
Did you play the banjo?
No.
I wish you guys had a half of a clue of how awesome he was at guitar.
But that was my dream. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to achieve with my life was to be a famous musician. It's pretty shallow. And not very realistic. When I got into my 30s and came through Bear Valley, my desire began to change. I wanted to be able to reach people with the gospel. And I still do. But now, my vision extends far beyond just me being able to reach the lost, but to help prepare others to reach the lost. You see, if I just wanted to grow, I could have stayed in Greenbrier and led followers. But I want to multiply now. And I know that multiplying takes place in training you and training those who will follow you and training others around the world. That's what legacy is all about. It's putting leaders in a position to do great things without you. Now, a part of this not only is the desire to multiply, but the legacy also involves a sacrifice. So we've talked about sacrifice and all that's involved in that, and certainly that is a key part of understanding legacy. It's going to involve sacrifice. It also involves group above individual leadership. That's that idea of not being able to think about ourselves, but rather the greater good of the group. Everyone is wanting to help others reach their potential. It's wanting to see you guys become great leaders. I used to love when somebody would say, you need to be careful, they're going to replace you one day, because I'm thinking, that's what I want. I want them to. And I hope someday one of you guys is standing right here, teaching this class to others, fulfilling that same vision. I hope someday that there's somebody who is able to come along behind me in the extension program and take it to even greater heights. I don't know that I'll see the 75 schools in my lifetime, but I know somebody coming behind me will. It involves group above individual leadership. And legacy involves walking away with integrity. I can't remember his full name. Lincoln. Something?
Abraham?
No, he was here speaking. He is a paraplegic. Were you guys here when Lincoln? What was his name? Something Lincoln.
Jones.
Anyway, he was writing a book about walking away. And the book was based upon, in the New Testament, the number of times individuals walked away from Jesus. The centurion that walked away from the cross. The rich young ruler that walked away. And all of the times the idea of walking away from Jesus and what that involved and what was taking place in that particular situation. And so based upon that, Lincoln Young, that was his name, Lincoln Young. But the idea is that when we walk away, guys, we need to walk away with integrity. There are going to be times that you may or may not face, but generally speaking, most everyone in this room at some point will walk away from a job. You're going to walk away from a ministry. You may work with a congregation for a few years or 10 years or maybe 30 years, I don't know. But at some point you will probably be in a position where you're going to walk away from that job. Walk away with integrity. Don't be the kind of guy that when you walk away from a job that people are glad you left. I used to tell our kids when they were younger that everybody brings happiness. Some when they come and some when they leave. Live your life in such a way so that people are happy to see you coming and not happy to see you leaving. And I'm telling you There have been some students through here that I was very sad to see them leave and always happy to see them come back. And there have been some I was happy to see leave and hope they don't ever come back. It all depends on your attitude and the legacy you want to leave. Walk away with integrity. So the question that is asked is this: what is your life sentence? What is your life sentence? Well, your life sentence will be determined by knowing the legacy you want to leave. When you're gone someday from Bear Valley, or from this life, or from some other ministry, do you know what legacy you want to leave? If you do, then live it. Live the legacy you want to leave. Because you can't wake up on death's door and then say, this is the legacy I want to leave. Because if your life does not measure up to that now, then that's not the legacy you'll leave, whether it's what you want to leave or not. Live it now. Third, when it comes to the idea of your life sentence, choose who will carry on your legacy. Who is that going to be? Who are you working with? That when you leave, that they will be able to step into those shoes and carry on. Do you know? Because you need to be working to prepare them now. Fourth, when it comes to your life sentence, make sure you pass the baton at the right time. Have you seen relay races? You know that they have that short period of space or time there between those two marks that they've got to be able to pass that baton in order to be successful in the race. And so the one person takes off running when? When the person gets to them? No, they take off running before you get to them. And then while you're in that section running at the same pace, then they hand the baton so that they don't lose a second in the transfer. That's the way we need to be about passing on the baton. You can't wait. You got to get them started before you get to them and then hand it off in between the marks. And so I ask you this question. When it comes to your legacy at Bear Valley, what will you leave the students? Now, I'm not talking about building stage seating, and I'm not talking about donating some gift to the school. I'm talking about when you walk away from Bear Valley, how do you want the other students and the staff in this school to remember you? What legacy do you want to leave them? Live that way now. And then what will you leave the Bear Valley Church? Legacy. Guys, you need to be thinking about it because you're leaving one, whether you like it or not. And so choose the legacy you want to leave. And then live it now. Now, I just basically am going to introduce the fourth essential to life and leadership because you already have the notes from it. And so this would be basically the heading that you would take to that section by Puduk and Dean Murphy on goals and strategy. The fourth essential to life and leadership is air. And really, if I were going to say that there was something that really started this whole concept of developing this material, it was this one. Because David Schwartz, the writer of the book that I told you about, The Magic of Thinking Big, says that goals are as essential to life, or to success, as air is to life. Goals are as essential to success as air is to life. And so when I thought about the idea of essentials to life and leadership, then the one that naturally came to mind was goals. If you're going to be successful as a leader, you need to understand how to set goals and how to put plans in place to reach those goals. And that's what we're going to do in place of a final on Wednesday. And instead of you getting a test grade from that standpoint, that's the reason I want the individual sheets of a goal that you would set if you were going to work in a congregation, whether that's missional or domestic. But fill out that, and of course, we kind of got crossways on how I define that. It's kind of a last-minute thing in place of a final. And your groups. Make sure you have an individual sheet for your groups. So every individual should have their own sheet, and then each group should have a separate sheet that has that list of a goal, plan to achieve it, resources, and so on that Kudu handed out. Everybody got that? On track with that? So that's what we'll do on Wednesday is we're going to meet in the Greek room. And what we'll do is we're going to go over how to establish a goal from those 4 major components. And then we will look at a SWOT analysis of the plan to reach that goal. How can we incorporate everybody's ideas to come up with a goal that is going to be set for this congregation and a plan to reach that goal, and then doing a SWOT analysis? I want you to physically see hands-on how to do a SWOT analysis so that in the future when you're working with a congregation and you have 14 men sitting out in front of you and you're able to show them, okay, this will help us determine whether we should do this or not. And if not, what should we do in order to reach our goal? And that SWOT analysis will be a great tool to have in your arsenal to be able to help them do that when it comes to setting and achieving those goals. Any questions or comments